Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Graeyzone. My name is Rob.
My name is Silas.
My name is Christian.
And I'm Raouf.
Today, we're going to talk about isolation.
Yes.
It's timely, and we're all quarantined, kind of.
Kind of. Not officially yet.
Not officially yet.
But mostly.
But only mostly quarantined.
Mostly quarantined, yes.
Highly suggested. It'll be a little bit of time, and I feel like everyone's going to get isolated sooner than later. But
Silas and Rob are sitting right next to each other right now.
Right.
So I want everyone to go and draw Yahweh fan art, please.
Yes. We live in the same house, so you can draw us cuddling on the couch. Whatever you want, actually. But let's dive into this topic of isolation. Anybody want to start, or I can start?
How about you start?
Okay. I did a lot of the empirical research, so we can start this off kind of boring if we want.
Well, let's...
I'll keep it short.
I was going to say, how about we just start about a general conversation between the four of us about what we think isolation is or what it means to us, and then we can go into what we delved into.
Okay, yeah. So I could talk on isolation. I think it's more than just being literally physically isolated. Like, you can actually go sit in a room and be by yourself and isolated. Mm-hmm. But personally, I get the feeling a lot of isolation even when I'm in crowds. I think isolation's a lot more of a mental state than people think. I think it's moved more towards that in general, like scientifically. But originally, a lot of people thought isolation literally meant you're alone by yourself.
Right. Yeah. In today's day and age, we see isolation happens like, you can be alone in a group of people.
Yep.
Right.
I guess I feel this quite a bit. And even when it comes down to isolation, you can have parts of yourself which are isolated from others, and then have parts which aren't isolated. You can be
like socially with people, but you can be emotionally isolated.
Yeah, I feel the mentally isolated a lot.
Mentally. The mental health aspect there is increasingly becoming relevant and important in new studies.
Yeah.
So,
well, think about it. If you're in a group of people that you can't relate to, and you don't feel like you can talk to in any way, shape, or form, surely you're more isolated in that case than having one person next to you that you can hold a conversation with.
yes.
Yeah, I mean, go to a different country and where they don't speak English as a first language. You'll definitely feel the isolation there.
To pull an actual study, so Signia did a study, and they found 47% of the people they interviewed said that they do not feel like they have meaningful in-person social interactions, and 27% of people said they feel like they have zero people who actually understand them. Like, they can relate to zero people. So they feel isolated 100% of the time, even around people.
Yeah,
and that study, I think, was in 2018, and I believe it was of 20,000 people.
Yeah, it was of 20,000. I looked at the same one.
Personally, I feel that isolation is something that is both an external and an internal struggle when it comes down to it.
Agreed.
I think that as a person, you can isolate yourselves from other people from an unwillingness to do certain things or an unwillingness to understand others, just as others might be isolating you for an unwillingness to understand you. And there's a balance that comes between the two of them. I have struggled with this personally with a lot of my hobbies and interests and my mental state sometimes, because sometimes I feel very, very alone, even if I'm surrounding myself with people. And in other cases, I might even be enjoying conversations and having meaningful conversations, but still feel isolated because there are certain aspects of myself that I know others don't understand or don't fully understand.
So there's a guy, his name is John Casapo. I can't say his last name. It's kind of weird. And he said that, kind of to reiterate what you said, like, loneliness or isolation leads to your brain going into like a self-preservation, and like you'll perceive social events as worse, and basically it just becomes a cyclical pattern of like you'd go out to feel less isolated, but doing that makes you feel more isolated. Yourself to go out and do stuff that you don't want to do, or even if you do want to do it, you're doing it with people who don't relate, and then you go home and now you feel more isolated, more lonely, so you force yourself to go out again, and it just like can spiral down pretty hard.
I feel like in that case you're starting to get more self-conscious about it because you keep pushing the issue.
That's what he said. He said basically it makes you think about it too hard, and it just makes everything seem worse.
Right.
You see, from a personal experience with that, at one point I was really, really pushing to constantly be doing something with certain groups, and those groups are changing at the time. And I know that what really helped me feel better about everything is I went from a larger group to talking to just a couple people that I really, really related with. One of you is actually one of them is actually you, Rob, but that I related much more to, and that really helped me. But I did keep pushing to do social interactions and to make sure that I wasn't socially isolated. But I found like talking to you guys in general, this podcast itself, and some other key people really helped me overcome this feeling of perceived aloneness, especially when I could talk about those feelings with other people who had similar experiences.
Well, that's the double-edged sword of pushing yourself to do it, right? On the one hand, you might feel like you're getting too self-conscious about it, and that generates a certain amount of nervousness, right? But it does let you figure out what you actually like about it, or what you like in terms of speaking to other people, right?
Yes.
Right.
And that lets you figure out how to alleviate that sensation.
Mm-hmm.
We're currently in a scenario where we're all heavily encouraged to keep distance from one another. How do you think that that's playing on people that are in the group of people that Christian's talking about, that relate to you, Christian? And how do you think that affects others who are more don't feel as isolated and are more sociable people? Like, I guess I could relate more to the latter category. But I want to hear your guys' input on how you think this is going to affect those with, current issues of or problems with isolation versus people who don't have it yet or don't have it that much.
So I actually think that the current status, it's 2020 and there's the coronavirus. I think this is going to affect people who have not dealt with issues of isolation before more than it is going to with people who already have. Now, it will affect people who already have in different ways, but it's going to introduce quite a few people who are, I guess, sociable, or who maybe they don't think about these things and don't have as much time to themselves. It's going to thrust them into the situation in which they are thinking about this. Now, the good thing is that with social media and things like Discord and Skype and all of the other online communication platforms, and even communications, electronic communications, it really cuts down on true isolation, as if this would have happened, 70 years ago. Even then, you would have had telephones you could have talked to somebody with, although it would have been more difficult.
Hold up.
Well, studies do show that isolation has doubled since the 80s. Or
the feeling of isolation.
Loneliness.
Yes.
Yes. Has doubled since the 1980s.
Yes.
Part of it is, though, that part of the reason that is I did some reading on that a while ago for that other project I was telling you about. Is that the culture has changed in which people are more isolated in general because they are using social media and things like this. But what I was more so implying is things are going to kind of stay leveled. Imagine, though, having a culture which really promoted person-to-person interactions much more than our current culture does, and then going into quarantine.
Yeah. It would be a lot worse than like now, because I mean, not only just the idea of working from home is shocking to some people as it is, let alone imagine 15 years ago.
15 years ago.
Where you still had people who would come out and pump your gas for you at the pump.
Right.
You know?
Or, you know, and like, you know, back in the 80s and...
Did you say 15 or 50?
15, but I probably more like 20 years ago. I haven't seen someone pump. I had someone offer to pump gas for me.
Hey, some states still do it by law.
Yeah, at
oh, really? I didn't know that.
The Sunoco in Dearborn that replaced that other thing across the street from BP. Before it changed over, there were 2 pumps at that place where the guy would pump gas for you.
No way.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting. But yeah, and I think in don't quote me on this. I think in Washington or Oregon, one of those 2 states, they actually have people that are required to pump gas for you because you're not allowed to do it yourself there. And I forgot which one of the states it was, but
New Jersey, Oregon,
and New Jersey.
Yep.
New Jersey does it too. Yeah. So there are states out there that you are not allowed to pump your gas. And it's like, you know, how are people over there dealing with this, right? Well, I guess it's not as much of a challenge. You know, you can keep your social distancing. The buzzword of the year besides coronavirus. You know, you can still keep that social distancing there. But even back in like the 80s, I feel like there were such interhuman connections back then. And now we live in a digital era where, you know, they were saying already on some of the studies I was looking at that this loneliness has increased incredibly in the last decade or so, because in the 2000s, you know, with the introduction of social media, now we can all interact from the comforts of our own home. So another thing, though, that I saw was that isolation actually really affects mental health. And so for people who have mental health issues, you know, I wonder how this isolation, you know, will it tax them worse? Will people grow more and more uncomfortable? Where's the breaking point in all of this, right? At what point does civilization collapse from being too isolated? That's my huge thing that I've been thinking about with all of this.
Where civilization collapses? I don't think that we're going to get to a point where civilization will collapse because of all of this, especially in the modern era. No, I think if you mean truly civilization.
Oh no, I mean like social order.
Oh,
collapsing, okay. And like everyone just like saying screw it, we're doing whatever we want to do.
That's a bit different than social civilization.
Well, it's not the whole civilization. Not gonna collapse.
If you mean just like ignoring the quarantine shit, literally immediately. Like,
oh yeah, people are already doing that.
The second schools shut down, the reason they shut bars down so quickly was because all the college kids just went to bars to hang out.
Yeah.
Like to hang out with their fellow students.
Yeah.
Florida, people were still spring breaking in part, like literally until people have chains and shackles on them, people will not stay inside. They just won't.
Let me out.
What I've been wondering is, let's say we stay in this state for 3 months. After those 3 months are over, can you really get people to, after they've tasted not having those social responsibilities and just being able to lounge around, I think there's going to be 2 classes of people. The people who explode out of their houses and are like, oh, thank God I can rejoin society. And the people who are like, you know what? I kind of enjoyed being able to sit around and watch TV and read books.
I think
I don't want to I am not super into having to reintegrate like that.
I think due to readings I have done on people who have been isolated, that the smaller group, it's going to be incredibly small, are going to be the people who continue to want to self-isolate. Because even people who are introverted or generally do isolate, 3 months within your house for most people isn't very common. Now, there are people who already do that, and if they already do that, then this is not.
They're going to continue doing.
They're going to continue doing that. But for people that this is new, it's going to be a very, even if they enjoy it for several weeks or even a month, it's going to be very,
they'll still crave that social interaction.
Yes, after 3 months, after 4 months, and they might have less need for it, but they're still going to want to catch up with things, because there is a certain psychological element to seeing other people that you have not seen in a while, especially if you have friends. I was going to say that I think my question, which does go along your train of thought, though, is a lot of Americans do not have paid vacations or time off in general. They might have the weekends off, but a lot of Americans don't actually have like blocks of time off.
Right.
Now, what I think that this period of isolation politically, and I know we don't talk about politics, but what I am going to say is politically is going to change people, because it is going to give them a large period of time where they are home alone or with their family, where they're sitting around. And yes, they can watch TV and do other things, but it gives the opportunity for more people to start thinking about what they like and dislike about our society and why things are the way they are. Such as, if you're isolated and you're working a pretty nice job, and your spouse is still working as a cashier someplace, and you see that they're being exposed to danger on a daily basis now, you might think to yourself, well, why are they not making a wage that they could truly live off of? Not just survive, but enjoy life.
That leads me actually to another question. You said people are going to have to spend more time together. How many divorces do you think this leads to?
Ooh, that's a good one.
Because a lot of people don't actually spend that much time with their significant other. And now you have to spend that much time with your significant other. You go from spending just the afternoons and nights, so afternoons because you sleep at night with your, significant other, to spending 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.
My grandmother had a saying. She said that the only reason that her marriage with my grandfather was able to be kept was because my grandfather left for 5 hours during the day, and this was during their retirement. But he was gone for 5 hours a day, talking with friends or doing whatever. And people do really need that. That personal isolation for some occasions. Like, I'm a social guy. I like to go out. But I do have times where I just want to be separated from people. And that's just for my personal well-being. And I think that that's important for everybody's mental health, is to have their me time.
Yeah, well, there's a quote, and I'm pretty sure it's a famous quote. It goes, being alone is a choice and is not bad. Loneliness is not a choice and it is bad.
Yeah.
Yeah. You choose to be alone. You not choose to be lonely.
Right. And so, you raise an excellent point. I think that if we were to see like the divorce rate after all of this, if it increases more so, then I guess you can blame the coronavirus for destroying marriages too.
There's the flip side of this, though. That flip side is the fact that there are many people who live together, whether they're married or not, and it is going to show them certain aspects about their relationship. And in some cases, let's say people aren't married, it might allow people to think about, hey, is this really going to work out? And could potentially create stronger marriages in the future of...
Or just prevent unwanted marriages.
Yes, preventing
Right.
the unwanted marriages and sorting out some things. So people who experience this, many of them might have more insight, especially people who are thinking about getting married for the first time, might have some more insight into what they really want instead of, rushing into things. Now, that's going to be a smaller percentage of people, but it's still there.
Yeah, I don't know, it's just food for thought. Like, some people really don't spend that much time with their significant other, and now
They have no choice.
you're
You're stuck.
yes, and it's more awkward to be like, I'm gonna go sit in a different room than you for 10 hours a day because I can't see you for 24 hours a day. Like, I was just thinking about it.
It's a good thought, though. I mean, Boof, do you have anything to say on that?
No, I do not.
How do you, now, and this goes to everyone, how do you guys feel now that you guys are in isolation? Boof, especially, because now you're out of a job right now, right?
Yes.
And you're completely home.
Were you actually laid off, or...
No, but
The museums are closed.
the museums are closed, and I'm not salaried, so if I don't make any money, they don't care.
Yeah, you
basically.
can still apply for unemployment, though.
Yes, but I mean, in terms of the museum sustaining any payment towards me, they are not.
I
Right,
see.
but that means that you're home 24/7 right now, right?
Yes, basically.
The other three of us are not.
Yeah, because I have work still. Rob and Christian still work together. But Boof, you are completely home. And how do you feel about that?
Well, for right now, I just came back from a week-long vacation in Jordan, right?
Right.
So I've actually
You're probably infected.
Probably infected. In case anyone is wondering, what they ask you to do if you're coming from out of the country is to stay at home for 2 weeks and take your temperature once during daytime, once at night. And that's to check if you have a fever or not, because fevers are apparently the single most common symptom of this disease.
Yeah.
And if you're clear for 2 weeks, then you're clear.
Have you been taking
Now,
a
of course,
temperature?
there's no way to keep me home. They don't got cops waiting outside, right?
But it's just a smart preventative because you have friends that
It's called
hopefully you care
being
about.
responsible, Boo. Take your temperature.
But anyway, I just for people who were curious, that's how they handle those situations. But for
Very
me,
nice.
coming back home after a week, what was the longest week of my life, this whole thing unfolded while we were in a different country. So you can imagine us, on one hand, trying to enjoy our vacation, and on the other hand, frantically checking the news to see if our airports were closed, if we could even ever come back to America. So that was annoying. But point being, having this week to rest has been nice, but what I wonder to myself is how much longer will I enjoy it for? Because personally, I've been pretty okay so far.
Well, that's good to hear. At least, you're not dying from boredom on the inside. But, yeah,
Well,
because,
this is where I was getting at the question of how do people actually react to having months off? For someone who wants to produce and consume a lot of entertainment, this is your time to shine, because
Right.
there are no further social obligations to you other than to sit down, either work on something or watch or play something. You see what I mean? Or read something. So this
Right.
is your time. This is where your creativity fertilizes in a way.
No, I mean, you're absolutely
But
right.
is that sustainable when you're not seeing other people for weeks and months on end? What little social interaction I'm having helps bolster the creativity in a way, because you need to get other people's thoughts at some point.
Yeah, and that's what actually we're doing today, is trying to connect. It's,
And
Trying to
the
create.
last thing is in terms of why it matters to interact with people, why that actually affects you is in a way, it helps you stay tethered to reality.
Right.
Because when you're not talking to other people and getting other measurements of the world around you, you're really left to your own devices to start coming up with whatever, and no one's around to fact check you.
I mean, and they've done studies on this. Back in 1993, this one guy whose name I cannot pronounce, Maurizio Montalbini. I don't know.
Close enough.
He was a underground cavern explorer, and he found a cave that he spent 366 days in. Right, he was in that cave for 366 days. When he emerged, though, he thought only 219 days had passed. Right, his entire sleep schedule became centered around 48 hours instead of 24, where he would be active for 36 hours and then asleep for 12. And the perception of time, they say, grows slower for people who are in isolation.
It also causes actual mental damage, like your brain deteriorates.
Right. And, in complete and total isolation, like no sound even, no light, nothing, within the matter of hours.
It's 3 days.
3 days? I just saw it here.
Wait, what happens to you in a matter of hours? Or in 3 days?
Let me see if I can pull this.
I'll tell you what I saw. Someone did a test where basically psychologists theorized that after 3 days of entire isolation, as in you're in a box, there's nothing to do. Like, we're isolated, but we have computers and shit, so we still have stuff to do.
Right.
With nothing to do, within 3 hours, your brain actually begins to deteriorate, and you will hallucinate, and your days become pretty, like, you don't know what time of day, you have no sense of anything.
Now, is this a standard person that's doing this?
Well,
they put a standard person in a box, a big white box.
Okay, it is a regular person, meaning that somebody could potentially have been trained to do this and probably not suffer the effects, such as like religious monks and people who purposely train themselves for self-isolation.
Yeah, this is like your average Joe.
Okay.
Yeah.
Your Joe Schmo.
I'm not a psychologist or a sociologist or whatever, but I feel like there is such a thing, and this might already be a term, I'm not sure, called group objectivity. Basically, the more people that are around to observe a reality, the more able they are to get a correct assessment of that reality. Basically, it's harder for too many people to be wrong. Now, that doesn't always hold up, but broadly speaking.
You're absolutely correct, because if I witness an event by myself, who am I to say that it actually happened? But if you, me, Rob, Christian, and then 30 other people witness the event, then we could all be like, did you see that? And they can verify for us.
Well, that's why larger case studies are better than small case studies.
Smaller case studies, that's right.
Right, but when you're alone, you have too much time to start, like, daydreaming and, like, theorizing stuff that could probably be easily disproven if you actually, ran it by a couple of people. But because you're not talking to anyone, it's easier to convince yourself of such thing. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah. No, we're agreeing. I think we're all agreeing.
Absolutely.
No, I know. I'm saying that's my thought process, and I wonder how long it takes before you really start to get unhinged in a situation where we're still surrounded by computers and phones. We're still talking to people. The caveman was a man in a cave. He didn't have much.
Well, that's what I was talking about the guy who sat in a white box for, I think he stayed for more than 3 days, but it was 3 days.
Right. And started hallucinating on day 3 or whatever, right?
He doesn't know when he started hallucinating because he
doesn't know the concept of time.
I think...
No, right, but I feel like those are still extraordinary circumstances. I'm talking about a situation where you're still at home.
Oh, how long it'll take us to lose our minds? I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know, because we can still talk to people.
And that's the glue right now that's keeping everything up.
Are we saying if we're able to still talk to our family and people over the internet, but we are not able to go out and do things?
Yes.
Well,
Because
I'm going to
that's
say
pretty much
from
a
personal
situation.
experience where I was very isolated for long periods of time. It would take quite a while for you to actually start to lose it. It might have an effect on you, but for you to actually go crazy, I mean, I spent an entire summer with just my family and like maybe people online.
Now, question for that, Christian: was that chosen or is that forced isolation?
In a way, forced isolation.
How so?
Well, I didn't have any friends at the time. And so I spent the entire 3 months of summer just alone playing video games. And this was probably 2008.
Many moons ago.
Yeah, 12.
So, yeah. Well, I guess that's an interesting case study then, because you could sustain it, but you also had entertainment, right?
I mean,
And you
yes.
and you were talking to people online too, correct?
I only started actually talking to people like with voice in probably 2009. In 2008, just text.
I actually think that makes a huge difference, the voice thing.
It
'Cause
does.
I want to say it was the summer, but I don't know. I'm trying to think of how to word it. So I was still around other people, but it was like that isolation where you're not around the people you want to be around.
Yeah.
And
You're alone with other people.
It's the loneliness that is described as the fundamental mismatch between the relationships we have and the ones we want. Anyways, I spent the summer where I was still in Boy Scouts, and our friend group was transitioning to the friend group we were currently in.
Right.
And I was gone for almost a month and a half on camps, back to back. I was home for maybe 2 days, and then I was back to another camp. And I could talk to people through text, but I started to feel really, really, really alone and really, really, really depressed. Although I was at camps and I was around people, it was just people that I didn't relate with. And then this was for people who don't understand. This was well before smartphones were common, and I was using a phone that slid and the keyboard came out. I don't know how to describe it.
Yeah.
And I had minutes, so I couldn't call people. And during one of my camps, they started doing the free minutes on the weekends through Virgin Mobile. And then I was able to call my friends and talk to them. And I actually, it helped so much, I couldn't believe it. Being able to talk to people that I relate with versus being able to text people I relate with was just a huge, massive difference in, the feeling of loneliness. Yeah. Voice helps so much.
Oh, definitely.
Sorry if that was a
this
tangent,
this all ties back to what Boof was saying, that group objectivity. We're grounded together. I personally think that humans are a group.
We are. We're a social species.
We are a social species. We require other humans in order to actually live.
Literally, our base on evolution is the fact that we work good in groups.
That's true. It's very true. So, what would happen? And I know this is a stretch and most likely not going to happen. But what would happen if, one day all of our internet went down and all cell service went away? What do you think would happen?
I would isolate myself in a way that I had previously done by reading books.
Ah, yes.
Well, that's if you're still quarantined, right? Or are you talking if it happened now, or
All right, so tomorrow's the beginning of the work week. This is recorded on a Sunday, so tomorrow's Monday. We wake up Monday morning to no cell service, no internet, and that's it. None of those.
It'd actually be really difficult because a lot of my job is planned through text.
Right.
And we're an entirely internet-based company.
This world's entirely internet-based.
Yeah, our whole company. Well, our company's job is putting internet in people's buildings, so it'd be hell on earth. But
from a social aspect,
it would be even worse now socially because we can't
communicate.
I can't go to the bar and talk to people. I can't drive to my friend's house. It'd be irresponsible to drive to my friend's house to hang out with them.
Right.
I wonder if at that point you're going to start seeing mass rebellion against any quarantine orders.
There would
Because
be.
I think that's
Oh,
going to be
there
the
would be.
snapping point for a lot of people.
If we can't communicate digitally or like anything, no one's going to follow a quarantine
Right.
law.
You know,
Because
you
like,
see,
when in human history has the entire globe shut down like this?
well, you don't need to study the entire globe, because you just need to study regional areas which were disconnected and then had quarantines like this, like Spain. Spain did this during the Inquisitions, and during, I think, I am not good with the second occurrence of the Black Death, but during the second occurrence of the Black Death, the Inquisition basically forced people into quarantine and isolation for 30 days by themselves, as well as shut down entire areas of the countryside and things like that, and it happened. Now, those
And we'll
people...
all see how well adapted those people are.
Those people were not... Yeah, you could say that, but what I'm getting at is those people were not interacting on a global level. In fact, if we really want to get to isolation, I think the best modern day, I guess, group you could talk about for isolation would be North Korea. Although they are social within their country, there is an incredible amount of isolation and, curfews and things like that. And they don't...
Or the Amish.
The Amish,
Or
but
the
the
Amish.
Amish are actually very social within their groups.
No, well, what interests me is social within the community, like on an individual level. I'm not worried about on a nationwide scale.
Well,
You're talking about entire solo in isolation. I can't talk to anybody, period. I'm by myself.
yes.
Right?
Yes.
Yeah, it would not take very long to lose your goddamn mind. I
I
can
Well,
take
yeah,
myself.
well, that's what I mean is at what point is there massive backlash against any quarantine order?
But you are also looking at that from the assumption that everybody is living by themselves, which isn't the case.
That's true.
So, if we're talking about in our current situation, ironically, as Americans, even people who are much more in favor of big government would be rebelling against that, because Americans themselves pride themselves on this aspect of rebellion. Even if Americans are also very let other people do the correct thing, but I am going to do what's in my best interest. That's a very American mindset.
Yeah, that comes from this hyper individuality.
Yes.
Our nation has promoted.
Now, I think with that hyper individuality, it's definitely a double-edged sword, because a lot of people view themselves as, yes, it's me against the world, but that also means that they are self-isolating on the everyday, and they have this... It's going to create a lot of cognitive dissonance, because they are going to realize very quickly that, no, they do actually need other people. When you...
Right.
There's a self-romanticization of, I don't need other people, that a lot of people have, and it's not really the case.
Well, I mean, if that were to happen, I think that I would immediately go out and try to find some other people to talk with, because I just, if there were to be a limit imposed upon me for any sense of this, I don't think I would personally like it. If you were to tell me, oh, hey, by the way, you're not allowed to communicate with other people because it's down for whatever reason, it's gone. You no longer have that choice. I would physically take myself and place myself in an area where I can then communicate with those other people.
Yeah.
If it were to just go over there and be with them, yes, I would do that.
Yeah, because I love Silas, Ashley, Julian, but I cannot stand them for that long. By just the four of them, I'd fucking lose it.
Well,
See, that's the thing. I wonder if, although all these people self-report that they feel more isolated in the digital era, I wonder if if the internet gets shut down, that they realize that they were leaning on it as a forum, as a platform for an exchange of ideas way more than they thought they were.
Yeah, well,
Right.
one of the issues with isolation or loneliness is like people aren't willing to admit that they're lonely, or admit that they won't admit to shit like being lonely.
Americans are
sentence.
really bad about it.
Yeah, we're very stubborn about it, and then people also won't admit that they find solitude through the internet because they fear being ridiculed for saying my friends that are online, my online only friends. Americans don't want to be ridiculed, and we already have such a culture kind of based against like being online. That's not real friends. Being on the computer, that's not a good way to spend your time. Like in America, it's a big social. It's kind of like a social don't do it,
Mm-hmm.
And I think if it was taken away, people would all of a sudden realize how much we actually do rely on it and how important it is.
So do you think that? All right,
Go ahead.
Go on. I'm just going to ask this question real quick. If we were to take away internet for everyone, do you think that would cause more people who find themselves lonely to go and seek out other people? Do you think that this would? Yeah. Okay. I see what you're saying. I agree with that.
But we're saying this would be under a government quarantine?
Well, there's government quarantine that's going on, right? Or
Yes.
ish. Yeah, let's say
So
that it's
let's-
In
happening
California and
nationwide.
New York, there's a total lockdown.
So
We
let's
don't have that
Yeah.
yet.
let's keep the idea of the quarantine about here if there's no
Okay.
internet. Now, I want to ask you, so you would go out, right? So you would be committing an action which would be placing people in danger.
Yes.
I would just invite people to come and tent on our lawn. That way we could have all of our friends next to each other.
Well, okay, yeah, I guess.
Now, obviously, there's a difference between planning things out and just going and doing things. If we knew about this virus a little bit in advance and we said, "Hey, we all know that we're not going to be working. Let's all go someplace and we're going to wait out this quarantine together for 6 months or whatever. And, we'll make sure we take proper precautions by sending out somebody to get food and they'll have masks on and things like that." That's one thing. But if you are just saying, "No, F the government, I'm going to go out even though there's this infectious disease out there," doesn't that kind of go in the idea that you are taking an action, Silas, that would put many others at risk instead of not taking an action that would save others?
Well, okay, so when I say I'm going to go out, that doesn't mean I'm going to go and find people to gather in 50 or more and, let's just have a Corona party. No, what I mean is, like, if I were under quarantine, right?
Yeah.
And suddenly lost the ability to communicate with my mother.
Yes.
And I was like, you know what? No, I'm not going to let that stop me from going to go see my mother. And I would then proceed to go and see my mother. I'm not going to go and go to every store and
it doesn't
cough
have to
on
be
everyone.
you're going to every store and you're coughing on everybody, though. What I'm getting at is, in that case, you are still actually following the idea of a quarantining. You're limiting your social interactions. Yes, you might be breaking the hard rule of, no, you can't go outside your house. But you're still following that, which is different than just saying, F the government, I'm going to go and do what I want to do and go to the bar, although bars are closed. But let's theoretically say they were open and say, I'm going to go to the bar, I'm going to go and live my normal life. That's very different than that. But a lot of Americans would do that.
Right, they would.
Americans are doing that.
There still are clubs in Florida that are open.
Yes.
That's because it's Florida.
A lot of Americans are literally just saying, it'd be great, let's all get together anyways. Selfish.
It is.
I mean, I think all this ultimately speaks to the fact that although some people might say they're fine with being isolated for a while, instinctually, they pride or they value a sense of togetherness more so than they value public health, basically.
Yes.
And and that is because Americans as well very much look at it as the other people outside their sphere of influence aren't very important. I forget what this is called, but I know there's a term for the idea that Americans have a very high sense of like, that person's drowning, I'm going to jump in and save them, but they have a very low sense of like, if I dump this toxic waste into the river, people downstream are going to die.
They're like socially unaware.
Yes, they have like conscientious.
Situationally, yeah.
And so if everybody could see the people who had coronavirus, they probably would. Obviously, they wouldn't go out. If there was just a big aura of like, this building has it in here, they would be like, no, I'm not going to go in there. But because it's an invisible threat, and our culture is very, I guess, encompassed by the idea of like, I'm going to do something if I see it, but if it's out of sight, out of mind.
Yep. Gotta see it to believe it.
Right.
So...
well, it's very interesting. I mean,
I wanted to link this... Actually, I was trying to catch you in a trap, if I'm going to fully be honest, Silas.
I sensed it.
I was going to relate this to the trolley cart. And your idea on not pulling the lever...
Yeah,
because you wouldn't be taking any action, and the sense that if you went out and spread the disease, you would specifically be taking an action.
That's true.
Shout out to our Charlie Card episode. Check that out.
Yeah, shout out to that episode. But in relationship to that, I think that with this quarantine, it would be either you don't take an action and you kill one person. But if you do take an action, you'll kill 5 persons, right?
Yes.
I think
so it is the reverse situation. It is if you pull the lever, 5 people die.
Right, and I would be pulling that lever, going to go see. But, yeah, well, I mean, this isolation thing is huge right now, and I just wanted to have a little chat about it. Are there any other ideas that you guys wanted to bring up about everything with this isolation that's going on?
I'd take that as a no.
Give us a like, comment, subscribe, and follow us, and let us know what you think. But until next time, this is Silas,
Rob,
Christian,
and Raouf.
And you are with the Graeyzone. Stay safe out there, and we'll see you next time.